I owned a watch that could rewind time by exactly 5 minutes. On my 28th birthday, my husband was reportedly killed in a car crash on his way to buy my birthday cake. Desperate to save him, I pulled that forgotten watch from the depths of my closet. But 5 minutes was such a terribly short window. To save him, I had to rewind time over and over, crashing and bleeding in the process. Finally, on my 30th attempt, I pushed my car to 120 miles per hour, timed the brakes with absolute precision, and managed to intercept his vehicle before the collision occurred. But when the driver's side window rolled down, Dominic merely looked me up and down with a sneer. "You really are pathetic, Sienna. You actually ruined your own face just to save me. Well, look at you now. Let us see how you plan to compete against Melody for the pageant crown." I stood frozen in the cold air, suddenly remembering the terrible cost of the watch. Every single activation fast-forwarded my biological clock by 1 year. I had used it 50 times in total over my life. 50 years had been stripped away in a matter of hours. At 28, I had suddenly become a 78-year-old woman. You did this on purpose?" "Of course," Dominic said, leaning back in his seat. "Melody wanted to win the crown, but you have held the title for 10 consecutive years. This was the only way to get you out of the competition." He offered a cold, smug smile. "It is a good thing you told me about that watch 5 years ago. Otherwise, we could never have pulled off such a seamless plan." I had shared the secret of the watch with him during our 3rd year of marriage. To help him secure a critical business merger, I had used the watch 3 times, a strain that had cost us our first unborn child. When he found out, he had wept, holding me close and begging me never to touch the watch again. He swore he would work day and night to build a life for us, so I would never have to sacrifice myself. True to his word, he spent the next few years climbing the corporate ladder, and the watch was buried deep in our closet. Yet now, he had used my own life as a pawn to elevate another woman. "Weren't you afraid I wouldn't be able to save you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Even with the watch, my physical limits are human. What if I had failed? He gave a soft, amused chuckle. "I was never in any danger, Sienna." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an empty, theatrical blood pack. The hospital notification and the crash had all been carefully staged. It was nothing but a grand performance designed to drain my youth. "Do not look so miserable," Dominic said, reaching out to pat my withered cheek. "Even if you look like this, you are still my wife. That will not change for the next few decades." Decades? He assumed only my appearance had changed. He did not understand that my internal organs had also aged to 78. I did not have decades left. My body would soon succumb to the natural decay of old age before I could speak. Dominic opened the car door and walked past me, his eyes lighting up Melody. I turned slowly, my stiff joints aching. Melody threw herself into Dominic's arms, sobbing as she playfully hit his chest. "Dominic, you scared me to death. I thought something had actually happened to you." Dominic wiped her tears away with a look of pure devotion. "It is all right, sweetheart. Look what I bought for you." He opened the trunk, and a bundle of colorful balloons floated into the air, revealing a beautiful cake. "It is your favorite mango flavor." I drove all the way to the bakery on the east side to get it. Melody blushed, leaning against his shoulder. "You are so bad. Who said I was your wife?" The cake had never been meant for me. The words, "I love you, my beautiful wife," written in frosting had been meant for her all along. I clutched my chest, my heart began failing due to the shock and the time magic, and I fell right in front of them. Dominic was shocked, and before he could speak, my eyes closed. Then I woke up 2 years into my relationship with Dominic before I told him about the watch. After waking up 2 years into a relationship with Dominic, the first thing Sienna did wasn't cry. It was find the watch. Her hands trembled as she dug through the hidden compartment beneath her closet floor. The silver watch was still there, pristine, untouched. 28 activations remained. 28 years of life. In her previous life, she had believed the watch was a blessing. Now she knew it was a curse and a temptation. A temptation Dominic would never be able to resist. Sienna didn't confront Dominic yet. She acts exactly like before. Sweet, trusting, in love. Meanwhile, she's observing, waiting, because she remembers something. Dominic didn't become a monster overnight. The seeds were already there. She just hadn't wanted to see them. Then she starts nudging things. Not illegally, strategically. She knows which business deals he'll eventually try to cheat on, which investors he'll try to deceive, which employees he'll exploit, which corners he'll cut, because she's already lived through all of it. And this time she isn't there to clean up the mess. Maybe she even keeps the watch as insurance. Not using it, just keeping it. Because every time she looks at it she remembers 50 years stolen. 50 years she can never get back. Every wrinkle, every failed heartbeat, every desperate rewind. All because she loved the wrong man. That anger doesn't disappear. It fuels her. And personally, I think a revenge-driven Sienna would have a moment like this. Dominic eventually falls in love with her all over again. Not because he's changed, but because without Melody constantly in his ear, and without Sienna sacrificing everything for him, he finally sees her value. By then it's far too late. One night he asks, "Sienna, when did you stop loving me?" And instead of some noble speech about forgiveness, she answers, "The day I died." Dominic laughs nervously, thinking she's joking. But Sienna is completely serious, because in her mind, she did die. She died on that roadside at 28 years old while he stood beside Melody and watched. And the woman standing in front of him now is someone he never deserved to meet. That kind of revenge hits harder than a jail sentence sometimes because Dominic slowly realizes he's losing the one thing he can never get back. Not money, not status, not Melody. Sienna. The woman who once would have traded years of her life to save him, and now wouldn't spend a single second on him. Sienna smiled and poured Dominic another cup of coffee. "You're working too hard." Dominic looked up from his laptop and smiled. "Only because I want to give you the best future possible." The words were identical, word for word. In her previous life, he had said the exact same thing. 3 years later, he would be standing beside Melody while she died. Sienna almost laughed. Instead, she slid the coffee toward him. Of course. A month later, Dominic excitedly burst into her apartment. "I got it." Sienna looked up from her book. "The Henderson contract?" His eyes widened. "How did you know?" Because in her previous life, she had spent 3 sleepless nights fixing the proposal he accidentally corrupted. Because she had secretly rewritten half the presentation. Because she had personally convinced the client not to walk away. But this Dominic didn't know any of that. To him, his success had been entirely self-made. Sienna smiled. "A lucky guess." He laughed and kissed her forehead. "I swear you're my lucky charm." The irony nearly made her choke. The Henderson meeting arrived 2 weeks later. In the previous timeline, Dominic had forgotten an essential financial report. Panicking, he had called Sienna. She had skipped an important pageant rehearsal, driven across the city, and delivered the documents just in time. The contract had been saved. This time her phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Sienna watched the screen. "Dominic." She let it ring. Eventually a message arrived. "Emergency. Please call me." She locked her phone and returned to reading. The Henderson contract collapsed. The client walked away. Dominic lost nearly 6 months of work overnight. For the first time, Sienna saw genuine confusion in his eyes. Because things weren't unfolding the way they were supposed to. In his previous life, every mistake somehow fixed itself. Every disaster somehow disappeared. Every opportunity somehow worked out. He never realized there was a reason. He never realized there was a woman behind the curtain. Meanwhile, Melody entered the picture. Exactly on schedule. Sienna first saw her at a charity event. The same bright smile. The same calculated innocence. The same hungry eyes. This time Sienna paid closer attention. And she noticed something she had missed before. Melody wasn't looking at Dominic. She was looking at the donors. The sponsors. The wealthy socialites. The cameras. Interesting. Very interesting. Perhaps Dominic had never been the prize. Perhaps he had only been a ladder. That night, Sienna sat alone in her penthouse. The silver watch rested on the table beside her.
Tick, tick, tick.
The sound echoed through the room. Sometimes she still dreamed of being 78. Dreamed of brittle bones. Dreamed of collapsing on the roadside. Dreamed of Dominic's laughter. She touched the glass face. 28 activations remained. 28 years. Enough to change almost anything. But she never reached for the button. Because she had finally understood something. The watch wasn't what gave her power. Knowledge did. And knowledge cost nothing. A year passed. Dominic's company struggled. Without Sienna secretly carrying him, his flaws became impossible to hide. He missed deadlines, mishandled negotiations, alienated clients. Meanwhile, Sienna quietly expanded her own business empire. The gap between them widened every month. It drove Dominic crazy, because for the first time, he wasn't ahead of her. She was ahead of him, far ahead. Then came the first major crack. Sienna received an anonymous email. Attached were photos. Dominic and Melody, holding hands, leaving a hotel,
Kissing.
months earlier than they had started their affair in the previous timeline. Sienna stared at the screen, then smiled. In her last life, she would have cried. She would have confronted him, begged for answers, asked why. This time, she simply saved the files and created a folder.
Dominic.
Inside it, she began collecting everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every mistake. Not because she intended to expose him immediately, but because she knew something he didn't. People like Dominic always destroyed themselves. The only question was how much rope they needed. 3 months later, Dominic appeared at her door carrying flowers. His face was pale. "Tough day?" Sienna asked. He forced a smile. "Just business problems." Problems caused by the fact that Melody had convinced him to invest company funds into a risky venture. A venture Sienna knew would collapse within 6 months, because it had already happened once before. Only in the previous timeline, she had used her connections to quietly save him. This time she sipped her tea. "And how's Melody?" The color drained from his face. For a brief second. Just a brief second. But Sienna saw it, and smiled into her cup. The hunt was finally becoming interesting. One evening, Sienna sat across from Dominic on the balcony. The city lights glittered below. Dominic was complaining about another failed business deal. The investor changed his mind at the last second. Sienna swirled her wine. "Would you change the past if you could?" Dominic laughed. "Who wouldn't?" She reached into her purse, then slowly placed the silver watch on the table. Dominic frowned. "What's that?" "My family heirloom." The moment his fingers touched the metal, a familiar chill ran down Sienna's spine. In her previous life, this had been the moment everything started. Only this time she knew exactly where the road ended. "It can rewind time 5 minutes." Dominic stared at her, then burst out laughing. "You expect me to believe that? Watch." Sienna picked up a wine glass and dropped it. The crystal shattered against the floor. Before Dominic could react, she pressed the button. The world twisted. 5 minutes vanished. Suddenly the glass was back in her hand, unbroken. Dominic's smile disappeared. His face went white. The watch ticked quietly. 1 activation gone. Dominic stared at it as though he were staring at God. That night, he couldn't sleep. Neither could Sienna. She already knew what came next.
Greed. Curiosity.
Obsession. The same sequence every time. The only difference was that now she was prepared. Because there was one secret Dominic didn't know. The watch's curse only affected the user. And since Sienna wasn't the one activating it anymore, she remembered everything. Every rewind. Every altered timeline. Every choice. While Dominic would slowly age. At first he used it for small things. A failed negotiation. A bad stock trade. An embarrassing conversation. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Tiny corrections. Tiny victories. The changes were almost impossible for anyone else to notice. But Sienna noticed every single one. One afternoon Dominic entered a restaurant. Then suddenly blinked. Confused. The waiter repeated the exact sentence he'd spoken moments earlier. A fork dropped. A woman laughed. Everything repeated. Dominic smiled. Sienna smiled too. Another activation. Another year.
Gone.
Weeks passed. Then months. Dominic became addicted. The watch made him feel invincible. Mistake? Rewind. Bad investment?
Rewind.
Argument? Rewind. Failure? Rewind. The more he relied on it, the less capable he became without it. And every time he used it, Sienna quietly counted.
22.
23.
24. 25.
Years. Then one morning Dominic stared into his bathroom mirror and froze. There was a silver hair near his temple. He plucked it out immediately. A coincidence. Had to be. He was only 29. A month later there were 3 more. Then wrinkles. Then persistent exhaustion. Then joint pain. Doctors found nothing wrong. Meanwhile, Sienna remained exactly the same.
Young.
Healthy. Beautiful. Unchanged. And that terrified him, because he was beginning to suspect something. One evening he confronted her. Have you used the watch recently?
No.
Then why aren't you aging? Sienna looked at him calmly. Why would I be aging? Dominic's blood ran cold, because for the first time he realized something horrifying. She had never actually said the price applied to everyone. He had assumed, and assumptions had consequences. That night he checked the watch. Hidden beneath the cover was a line of tiny engraved text. So small it was almost invisible. The user pays the price. Dominic dropped the watch. His hands began shaking, because suddenly everything made sense. The headaches, the wrinkles, the fatigue, the years disappearing from his life. And somewhere across the city, Sienna sat alone in her penthouse, watching the sunset, smiling. For the first time, Dominic understood exactly what she had felt in that other life. The panic, the horror, the realization that time was running out. Only this time, the countdown belonged to him. Dominic didn't sleep that night, or the next,
Or the one after that.
The watch sat on his desk like a loaded gun.
Silent.
Harmless looking. Monstrous. He counted. 32 activations. 32 years.
Gone.
His hands shook so violently he could barely hold a glass of water. He was 30 years old, but according to the watch, his body was now 62. The only reason he still looked relatively young was because the aging wasn't perfectly visible on the surface. Not yet, but it was happening. Inside. Every second, every heartbeat, every breath. His remaining lifespan was evaporating. And suddenly he understood. Not completely, but enough. Enough to realize that someone had once paid this price for him. The next day, Dominic stormed into Sienna's office. The silver watch slammed onto her desk. You knew. Sienna didn't even glance up from her paperwork. Knew what? The curse. Now she looked at him.
Calm. Cold.
Unfamiliar. The watch isn't cursed. Dominic laughed. The sound was hysterical. 32 years. His voice cracked. I lost 32 years. Sienna leaned back in her chair. For several moments, she simply studied him. Then she asked quietly, and how many years would you have spent if it wasn't your own life being taken? Dominic froze. Something in her voice made his stomach drop. Because for a moment, just a moment, he saw another version of her. An old woman. White hair. Wrinkled skin. Tears in her eyes. The vision vanished instantly, but the horror remained. From that day onward, Dominic became obsessed. Not with using the watch, with escaping it. He spent millions researching aging, longevity treatments, experimental medicine, private clinics. Nothing worked. The years were gone.
Permanently.
Meanwhile, Sienna watched, patiently, because this wasn't revenge yet. This was merely consequences. Then Melody noticed. You're getting old. The words slipped out before she could stop herself. Dominic looked up sharply. What? Melody immediately regretted it. But it was true. The changes were becoming obvious. His eyes looked tired. His skin less firm. His energy lower. At first she had ignored it. Now she couldn't. For the first time, Dominic looked older than the photographs taken only a year earlier. And Melody hated old things. She hated weakness. She hated decline. Most of all, she hated losing investments. Within months, her messages became colder, then shorter, then infrequent. Then she started meeting other men, wealthier men, younger men, more promising men, exactly as she had done in the previous timeline. Only this time Dominic was the one being discarded. One evening he followed her. A mistake. A terrible mistake. Because what he saw destroyed him. Melody sat in a restaurant laughing with another businessman. The same smile she'd once reserved for him. The same touch. The same flirtation. The same promises. Dominic stood outside in the rain. Frozen. Because suddenly he remembered another conversation. A conversation from the other life. Melody saying, "I only wanted the crown. Not him. Not love. Not a future. The crown. The status. The victory." He had thrown away Sienna for a prize that had never wanted him. That night the memories came back harder than ever. The fake accident. The blood packs. The balloons.
The cake.
The road. The old woman. Sienna.
Dying.
Right in front of him. And his own voice. "Look at you now. How do you plan to compete with Melody?" Dominic woke up screaming. For the first time in his life, he truly hated himself. The next morning he appeared outside Sienna's house. He looked terrible, years older, broken. When the gate opened, he dropped to his knees immediately. Not out of manipulation, not out of strategy, because his legs literally couldn't support him anymore. Sienna? She stood on the steps, looking down at him. The morning sunlight illuminated her face. Young, beautiful,
Alive.
everything he had stolen from her in the previous life. Everything he had wasted in this one. "I remember." His voice cracked. "I remember all of it." Sienna's expression didn't change. Not even slightly. Tears poured down Dominic's face. "I killed you." Silence. "I didn't stab you. I didn't poison you. But I killed you." Still silence. "I know that now." His shoulders shook. "I know." For a long time neither spoke. Then Sienna slowly descended the steps. Dominic's heart surged. Hope. Pathetic, desperate hope. Maybe she would forgive him. Maybe. Then she stopped directly in front of him.
And smiled.
It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone finally seeing justice arrive. "You finally understand?" Dominic nodded desperately. "Yes." "Good." Her smile widened. Because now the real revenge could begin. Unlike the first timeline, this time, she had years left. And Dominic didn't. Sienna didn't touch the watch. She didn't need it anymore. Dominic already understood the cost. And that understanding was doing far more damage than any rewind ever could. Within 6 months, Dominic's body began to fail in ways medicine couldn't explain. His hair thinned rapidly. His skin dulled. His joints stiffened as if decades had been compressed into him at once. Doctors ran test after test. The results made no sense. Biological age, fluctuating. Cellular decay, accelerated. Impossible, one specialist muttered. He looks like he's aging in real time. Dominic stopped correcting them when they called it a mystery, because he knew the truth. Every time he had pressed that button, he had paid. And now the debt had come due. All at once. Melody noticed the collapse before anyone else. But instead of concern, she felt something colder. Impatience. "You said your company would recover," she snapped one night, throwing her phone onto the table. Dominic looked up slowly. He was 30, but his eyes looked 45. "I'm trying." "That's not good enough." Her gaze drifted over him like she was evaluating damaged goods. "You can barely keep up with basic meetings anymore." Silence. Then Dominic asked quietly, "Do you even care what's happening to me?" Melody laughed once. "It wasn't kind. I cared when you were useful." The words landed clean. No hesitation. No guilt. Just truth. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. And something inside him finally broke in a way that wasn't magical. It was human. The separation was immediate. Messy.
Public.
Melody didn't even try to hide her next relationship. Within weeks, she was seen with a wealthy sponsor from the pageant circuit, smiling, laughing, perfectly composed again. Exactly like before. Only now there was no Dominic to lift her up. No Sienna to quietly stabilize everything behind the scenes. And this time, the industry was watching her without bias. What they saw wasn't a rising star. It was someone who had built her reputation on proximity to power, and now had none. Sponsors pulled out one by one. Contracts were quietly canceled. Invitations stopped arriving. Her perfect image began to rot in real time. Dominic, meanwhile, tried to salvage what was left of his company. But every instinct he once had, every shortcut, every manipulation, every reckless gamble, all of it had been silently compensated for in the first timeline by Sienna's unseen support. Without her, his incompetence was exposed. Investors left. Projects failed. Partners sued. Within a year, the company collapsed entirely. Not dramatically. Not explosively. Just steadily. Like something quietly decaying from the inside out. And Sienna? Sienna did nothing. She didn't interfere. She didn't push. She didn't sabotage. She simply existed outside of their collapse. Untouchable. Unreachable. Unchanged. And that difference alone became the punishment. Because Dominic realized something too late. He had never actually built anything himself. Not his success. Not his relationships. Not his stability. Everything had been held together by a woman he had thrown away. The final breaking point came on a rainy evening. Dominic stood outside a closed building that used to belong to him. Now it was empty.
Foreclosed. Gone.
He looked up at the dark windows and whispered, "I gave everything for 5 minutes." Behind him, a voice answered calmly, "And you wasted them." He turned. Sienna stood under an umbrella.
Dry. Composed.
Watching him like someone observing the final stage of an experiment. Dominic's voice cracked. "I didn't know the price." Sienna tilted her head slightly. "That's the difference between us." A pause. Then she stepped closer. "For you, it was curiosity. For me, it was survival." The rain hit the pavement harder. Dominic's knees nearly gave out again. "I loved you," he said weakly. Sienna studied him for a long moment. Then she answered without emotion.
"No."
"You loved what I gave you." Silence. "And when I stopped giving," she continued, "you stopped caring if I lived." That truth hit harder than anything before it, because it couldn't be argued, only accepted. Melody's downfall ended more quietly. No dramatic arrest. No scandal explosion. Just irrelevance. The kind that erases people slowly. She tried to rebuild her image.
Failed.
Tried to return to pageants. Rejected. Tried to leverage old connections. No one answered. Eventually she stopped trying. And one day, she saw Sienna again on television.
Crowned.
Successful. Smiling. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But because her life no longer required either Dominic or Melody to be significant. Melody turned off the screen. And for the first time, she understood something fully. She had never been the rival. She had only ever been the distraction. Dominic's ending
Came last.
not dramatic, not cinematic, just inevitable. He returned to Sienna one final time. Not to beg, not to plead, just to ask one question. Was any of it real? Sienna looked at him for a long time. Then she said softly, "Yes." His breath caught. "But not for you." A pause. "For you, it was convenience. For me, it was sacrifice." She stepped back. "Now it's neither." And she walked away, without looking back, not because she was cruel, but because Dominic and Melody had finally become what they always were in her second life. Worthless pieces of trash she doesn't have to think about.